Hello? You play to win the game. You don't play to just play it.
What's that? Playoffs? Don't talk about playoffs. You kidding me? Playoffs? I just hope we can win a game.
Get out there, play hard, enjoy those games.
What a beautiful day, college football fans. I'm Old Man Troy, joined by the marvelous youngster, Kevin Cunningham, a.k.a. Kid Cunny on Twitter. It's almost here, youngster. Almost here for the Big Ten. Then I'll start watching college football. Haven't watched any yet. Glanced at TVs, remote controlled through a little bit, but I've not sat down and watched a game. I'm waiting. I'm waiting for the Big Ten. And today, top four.
Yes. 2 weeks ago? 2 weeks ago, we did the bottom three of the Big Ten West. And then last week, we had Troy was across the country. And so he was doing things, I was doing things. And so just scheduling-wise, it didn't mesh up to do a bunch of shows. But this week, we're doubling down to get back on track. So, today we're hitting the top four of the Big Ten West: Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois. Spend, roughly 15 minutes on each, and that'll be that. So try to keep these shows.
Call it a day.
Yeah, try to keep these shows to an hour / at the end of the day, I know you can skip around. Realistically, it's a podcast. You can skip around to your team, whatever team you want to hear more about. But to go on for 30 minutes about Iowa football, that's great if you're a Hawkeye fan. But for literally everyone else, no one wants to hear 30 minutes about Iowa football. So,
we learned our lesson. No, we learned our lesson when we did our first one that took almost 3 hours, and we did it all in one sitting. And we just saw the numbers on it. It was a.
That was not good.
I'll put it this way: it was a good show. I mean, you and I had a blast. But as far as the ratings go and the number of listens, no. Who wants to listen to a 3-hour podcast? Not many people.
No.
Not many people. And now, of course, we've got our great sponsor, Inner Peak Coffee, who they actually sponsor our virtual studio line. So thank you to Inner Peak Coffee. And the owner of Inner Peak Coffee, a big Badger fan, youngster. He'll probably tune into this show. But let's get right to it. Let's get to it.
Yes. So starting with Illinois was fourth in the Big Ten a year ago. Now, Illinois, for the first time in 5 years, they made their first bowl game. They finished 6-7 overall. So they got to 6 wins. They got to 500. They got to a bowl game, which, again, for some teams, that's laughable. For 6-6 to be good enough for a bowl, we've talked about that in the past. Not going to go over it this show. But for Illinois, again, it's the first time in 5 years they've been able to do it. Last year was kind of a stepping stone, finally, for Lovie Smith. And so it's notable in that regard that, hey, look, the program actually took a step forward. They had some close losses. They had some close wins. They had a big win against Wisconsin. They went to Michigan State. I think they were down like 25 points in that game, and they won. They came back and won that. So they showed that they're competent. They showed that they could win 4 games in the Big Ten. And you lose 5, but at least you're winning 4 games against Big Ten opponents, and you're Illinois. You're not smashing up on a bunch of bottom feeders. So that was a positive from a year ago. Just some notes, as I do this time of year, going through
before
these teams.
You get into the notes,
Yep.
I do want to say that Lovie saved his job. We talked about that. If we didn't see progression, he probably would have been gone. And like you said, I am one of those guys, Kevin, where I look at a 6-6 team and go, why in the world are you getting a bowl game? Why? But for Illinois, that was like going to the Rose Bowl because they have not been in the postseason for, you said, 5 years. And when I look at it, Kevin, if Lovie did take that step and that program took that step, to get where you're going to be fourth constantly, you have to win the games you're supposed to win. That means the teams that are worse than you in your division. Unfortunately, here's what I'm seeing in the Big Ten. There's not a lot of supposed to win games in the Big Ten anymore. I mean, you got Rutgers. You got maybe Maryland you can throw in there.
Yeah. Even we talk about the powerhouse of the East Division and all the powers they have, but like the West, if PJ Fleck has Minnesota going at a solid rate, they're going to be good. And then Iowa and Wisconsin are always at least good. That's 3 teams right there where it's like you have to get over the hump as a program to step into that, hey, we belong with Wisconsin, we belong with Iowa, and if Minnesota is truly here to stay, then we belong with Minnesota too. So there are teams that, are just on a different playing field as far as consistency. A Northwestern, I mean, some years you can throw them in there. Last year was not one of them. But so, they're in the quote-unquote weaker division of the 2 in the Big Ten, but it's still not easy. It's not easy. So anyway, unless you got more, Troy, I'll start rattling off some facts.
Nick, go ahead. I'll interrupt like I always do.
Sounds good. So Brandon Peters returns as the quarterback. He was a Michigan transfer. Then he stepped in a year ago, and he did well for Illinois. Again, they won 6 games. They won 4 Big Ten games. They did okay. So that was a bright spot, and he returns, and he's the first starting quarterback at Illinois to return since 2016. So which was, I mean, you're talking 5 seasons ago. So that's nice to have your starting quarterback back at Illinois. It seems like it's been a revolving door. It seems like they've almost been Cleveland Brown-esque in terms of their quarterbacks. It's like, oh, who's the quarterback this year? Oh, they got a 4-star quarterback recruit, 4-star quarterback transfer. I remember that was a thing a few years ago. Then it's like, okay, he's here, and then where'd he go? Like, what did he do? What happened? Like, he's just gone. Okay, we've got this quarterback. Oh, okay, he's gone now too. Like, there was just never continuity. So with Brandon Peters returning, I want to say, that helps. So that's a good thing. Mike Epstein, the running back, he was supposed to be the guy the last 3 years for Illinois to lead the backfield. And when he's healthy going into a season, which is always, he starts off doing really well. And it's like, damn, this is a nice running back you got there. And then 3 years in a row, he's had season-ending injuries. So he returns now. He's supposed to be healthy. He's supposed to be the guy. But, again, can he stay healthy? So that's the bill for him is just staying healthy. If he can, then he will be productive. And Brandon Peters returns, so you can't necessarily probably stack 8 in the box to stop Epstein. So it's a nice little balance that Illinois should have going on. The offensive line returns 4 guys. Josh Imatorbhebhe is their top wide receiver. He returns. He's good. He could be an NFL guy. So they've got someone on the outside to throw to. Outside of him, it looks bleak in terms of returnees, just based on what I have read, what I have heard. Also, do not take what I am spewing at you now as absolute 100% facts in terms of exact numbers, because come tomorrow, come 2 hours ago, and it just hasn't, become news, someone could opt out for COVID. Someone could opt out for the draft. Someone could go into the transfer portal. So I just, if you want to spew hate at me for saying the offensive line returns 4 starters and then game 1, Illinois has 3 of their offensive line return its starters, and you're like, okay, you're an idiot. Well, no. So I just want to make that, especially during this off season, I never really talk about this any other year, but especially with this off season and COVID and guys going out, guys coming in, guys opting out, and then eventually opting back in, like there's just a lot to get through. So my apologies if I am incorrect somewhere. But anyway, so the offense has some pieces, depth behind Imatorbhebhe, probably not so much, but the offense should be okay in 2020. Defensively, they have some key returnees. I found this stat, Troy. This is pretty remarkable. Linebacker Jake Henson for Illinois had 7 forced fumbles a year ago. That led the entire country. So 7 forced fumbles in, 13 total games. That's pretty good. Except Henson actually missed 4 of those games. So, he played in 9. He had 7 forced fumbles. That's almost every single game he played, he forced a fumble on average. So that's quite absurd. The 3 from their secondary return. The defensive line in general has question marks because of guys, leaving, graduating, and whatnot. So the defense, it should be an Illinois defense, I think. It's going to be up and down. It's going to be, oh, look, we play Wisconsin, we're going to give up 35 points. Oh, look, we play Rutgers, we'll give up 10. It'll be a middle-of-the-road whatever defense, in my opinion. Could they outperform that? Absolutely. Could they be atrocious? Sure. But that's just my take on that. Recruiting-wise, they were actually 88th in the country and 14th in the Big Ten, which there's 14 Big Ten teams, so that makes them the worst in terms of just recruiting stats and putting scores on guys and whatnot. Doesn't mean the world, but at the end of the day, Ohio State is really, really good every single year for a reason. Part of it's coaching, but part of it because of the overall talent they have. There are teams that can, overcome that. Teams like Wisconsin consistently overcome that. But to finish last in the Big Ten in recruiting, not exactly ideal. Of course, guys can pop. You can turn 2 stars into top 5 draft picks. That happens consistently. But just something to note. And then schedule-wise, I'll go through it here. My initial thought was maybe 3 and 5. Not to say that Illinois is bad, but they start at Wisconsin week 1. So that's not fantastic. That, by the way, is a Friday game, which I didn't know was existing. I thought all games were starting on Saturday the 24th, but apparently Wisconsin is hosting Illinois on Friday the 23rd. So it's news to me. But at Wisconsin, and then you get Purdue at home, you get Minnesota at home. So there's some toughies in there for sure.
1 and 2.
At Rutgers, at Nebraska the next 2 weeks. You probably hope to split that. Obviously, beat Rutgers, lose to Nebraska. Could you go 2-0? Sure, but most likely probably 1-1 there. And then you get Ohio State, Iowa the following 2 weeks, and then at Northwestern. So again, that's not an easy schedule. You get Ohio State.
Yeah, it looks like a 3 and 5 record. I would agree with you.
Yeah. So it's not fantastic, but you get Rutgers on the other side, and you also get Ohio State. So you would assume a little split there, and then you have to play Iowa, you have to play Minnesota, you have to play Wisconsin. So it's tough.
Well, people are going to keep arguing, youngster, that the Big Ten West is a weak division. And I'll agree, but I'll also disagree. And I'll agree because you don't have the likes of Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan. But you have solid football teams. So in the East, you have a Rutgers team over there. You have a Maryland team over there, right? Maryland, they have flashes. Rutgers, I don't think they should be in Big Ten football, but that's a different discussion, right? So you got really
Indiana as well. And Indiana.
So you have those 3 teams, like we talk about Illinois beating the teams they should beat. So Illinois should beat those 3 teams. That would put them already then, 4th in that conference too, right?
Right.
You look at the the West. You got Wisconsin, always tough. Iowa, they can be great some years, and then they can be average to above average. Minnesota, on an uptick. Nebraska, new coaching staff, supposedly on a new uptick. Purdue, always a hard out. That's not a give-me game right there. And you got Nebraska. That's not a gimme game. And now Illinois is becoming a team where it's not a gimme game. It may have been 2 years ago. Where's the gimme game in the Big Ten East? There's not. There is not one from top to bottom. There's not a gimme.
Yeah.
And you can argue in the East that Maryland and Rutgers and Indiana are almost gimme games. That's all I'm going to say. I understand that the East is stacked, but I think top to bottom, the West, you look at all of those teams, and again, I didn't even throw Northwestern in there. That's not a gimme game either.
Right.
I don't know. People can disagree with me on that just because the West doesn't have the dominant top 10 teams. But from top to bottom, it's more competitive than the East Division in my mind. That's all I got.
Yeah, I completely agree. The East is more top-heavy. The West has more depth. And honestly, from the West, you almost always get a top 10, definitely a top 15 team in there somehow, whether it's Northwestern having a fantastic year or your classic, Wisconsin team, or once every 3 years, Iowa puts together a really good team, 3-4 years. So there's always one really good team. Maybe not necessarily top 3 national title contending team, but a really good one that beats just about everyone else outside of, a really good Oklahoma, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, But there's only a handful of those. Outside of that, you hope to be Wisconsin. That's the goal. That's the goal to get to before you start this Clemson breakthrough of, oh my God, where did Clemson come from? Like, you have to consistently be a top 25 team first. You don't just magically become, top 2 in the country every year. So the goal is to get to top 25, top 20, top 15 consistently, kind of like Iowa and Wisconsin. And then eventually you hope to have a breakthrough. But, yeah, so in short, I agree with you 100% there.
All right, next team.
On the way. Yeah, moving on to Iowa. So Iowa finished 3rd in the Big Ten West last year. They were 6-3 in the Big Ten. They won 10 games. They were 10-3 overall, which, again, they tend to do that once every 3 years or so. But again, you lost 3 games in the Big Ten, so it wasn't some fantastic breakthrough 12-1. We're going to the Rose Bowl type season. It wasn't one of those. But it was a good year. The offense a year ago, it was realistically, if you look at stats and rankings from across the country, it was kind of below average across the board, which is surprising considering the guys they had with Nate Stanley as their quarterback for seems like 3-4 years in a row. You assume the offense would have done better. It's a college offense that averaged 25 points a game. And in college, if you're a good offense, you're scoring 30-plus a game. That's just the way it is in college. NFL is different. College is, another beast. So Nate Stanley's gone. That's a question mark. Spencer Petras steps in as a quarterback. Some people had him as a 4-star, some as a 3-star. Regardless, he's been in the program a little bit. So he's presumed to be the starter stepping in. It's not set in stone as far as I could find yet. But that being said, we are doing this show on October 15th. So we're 8 days away from Big Ten football. But
then why would you name – here's the thing, Kevin. If I was in that situation where I had a quarterback battle going on and I was a coach, I wouldn't name my starter until the absolute last minute.
Right.
That way my first opponent has no idea who to prepare for.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I would agree 100%. So that's supposedly the starting quarterback. Tyler Goodson was a breakthrough freshman running back a year ago who Iowa didn't utilize until the last 3 or 4 games of the season. So now he's a sophomore. He's supposed to be the guy. That should be a good building block for your team to have offensively. It should be run first, and Petras can, go off of that. As far as the tight ends, both other top tight ends return. Wide receiving wise, you can make the argument that Amir Smith-Marset is the best wide receiver in the Big Ten. You could make that argument. So having him back is massive. He is definitely an NFL caliber receiver, and they've got guys behind him as well that have been in the program for a number of years who are talented. So they've got guys on the outside for Petras to throw to as well that he can lean on. So it's a nice year to step in, to have an emerging running back and to have an NFL receiver to throw to and to have both your tight ends back. And, so that's what Iowa has going for it offensively. That's what Petras has going for him offensively if he does become the guy. Whoever becomes the guy, he should have guys around him to help take the load off of him. Offensive line-wise, you lose Tristan Wirfs, which sucks because that's a first-round NFL tackle. But the offensive line still, it returns a good amount of guys. It should be a good group. It's not going to be, the country's best offensive
Iowa
line.
always has good linemen.
Exactly. So that, yeah, you lose an NFL tackle, but you probably have one on your depth chart somewhere.
Ferentz got on his tractor and rode around some cornfields and got another big offensive lineman right there in Iowa. I mean, people might say, "Oh, what are you doing, rubbing it?" No, I mean, it's same with Wisconsin.
Right.
Paul Chris can get on his four-wheeler and drive down the road and grab a big boy from Wisconsin and put him on the line. That's what Ferentz and Chris do. They build their programs from the offensive line. That's what they do. That's what they have always done. And the thing is, in Wisconsin and Iowa, you have very good offensive linemen, and they do a good job recruiting linemen outside of their own state. But literally, if you are a high school lineman, Kevin, in Iowa or Wisconsin, and you're one of the best, and you really want to play for your hometown state, you're going to. Because they will attack the best ones, and unless you're dead set on going to another Power 5 school, why wouldn't you go to Iowa or Wisconsin, where that that both of those programs groom linemen to go to the NFL? That's the way it is.
Yep.
And so, you might think I'm, you're ripping on Iowa. No, I'm not ripping on Iowa. That's the truth. Ferentz can literally walk down the road and grab another really good offensive lineman in Iowa. They do it all the time. So does Paul Chris. That was actually a compliment when I said he got on his tractor and went down the road and in the cornfield.
Yeah.
Because both programs do a really good job of developing linemen. And if I was a kid in high school and had aspirations of going to the NFL and I was a good lineman, I would be praying to God if I lived in Iowa or Wisconsin that I could play in my home state and get groomed by those programs. That's all I got.
Yep. Completely agree at 100%. Defensively, from a year ago, they were top 20 in just about everything. They had a good defense, and AJ Epineza was fantastic, a 5-star talent coming out of high school, went through Iowa, and now he's in the NFL. So, you're losing a talented guy there for sure. They've got other guys returning and whatnot. It'll be an Iowa defensive line that's good. It's not as reputable as their offensive line, I suppose, but their defensive line will be good. It's not going to be this gaping hole. Linebacking core, plenty of those guys return. The secondary loses a couple pieces, but they should be fine just based on depth and guys they have coming in. So this defense, maybe it takes a little step back. Maybe it's not dominating, but it's still going to be a good classic Iowa defense. There will be games where it's like you just can't move the football and you score 7 points, and it is what it is. So that is that. This team, realistically, if Petras can come in and do what Stanley did immediately, that's fantastic. They should have a good team in general. Again, they won 10 games a year ago. They don't have 10 games to win this year.
No, so I was going to say that means they're going to win 7 or 8 on a normal year just because that's what happens with Kirk Ferentz. And that's where my beef is. That's why I always get worked up when we talk about Ferentz, because he needs to start getting consistent. 10, 11, 12, 10, 11, 12, 10, 11, 12. Kind of where Paul Christ is right now. And that's been my beef with Ferentz and to every Iowa fan listening in. And you may dislike me for it, but you're okay. You're happy with Ferentz. And so my response to you is you're happy with being mediocre. And then every couple of years having a double-digit good team. This is how he can shut me up, Kevin. He can shut me up this year, 8-game season if he goes 6-2. At least shut me up for a couple months, because that would then be on pace to have won another 10 games. But that's my beef with Iowa football. Yeah. And I don't understand Iowa fans. Why can't you be on the same playing field as Wisconsin year in and year out? Same type record, be at the top of the Big Ten West. You should be. And you're sitting there riding the coattails of Ferentz because, last year he won 10. Oh, okay, let's give him, a lifetime extension. And then, we'll win 8, we'll win 7, we'll win 10 again. Woo, way to go, Ferentz. then we'll win 7,
Right.
then we'll win 8, then we'll win 12. Woo! Look at Kirk to the Rose Bowl. Woo! Then 7, then 8.
Right.
If I'm a fan, I'd be like, I don't want an every other or every third or fourth year of winning and going to a great bowl game. I want it every year. And you play in the Big Ten West, where I just talked about it, where there is, you don't have those top 5 dominating schools. You could build your program to be a top 1 or 2 team in the Big Ten West. And Ferentz hasn't done it. I'm done. You can go to the schedule. See if they can go 6-2.
So, game 1, I completely agree with you 100%. That's probably the 4th time I've said that today already. But
it
Iowa's schedule starting.
I'm going to start charging you for that.
There we go. I don't even have to speak. Iowa at Purdue week 1. That's on a Saturday, so that's that. October 24th. That's when the bulk of games happen for the Big Ten to start. So Iowa at Purdue, that's an interesting one. Week 2, you get Northwestern at home. Week 3, Michigan State at home. Michigan State's definitely on a downward spiral these last couple of years. Game 4, week 4 at Minnesota. That'll be a really nice one.
That'll be a good one.
Week 5, the week right after that, at Penn State. If there's a year to play at Penn State, this is exactly the year you want to play at Penn State. Thanks to COVID. Not having 120,000 fans decked out in all white. That's, instead you have 0 or 10,000. It's a lot more calm. So that's a quote unquote positive, I suppose. Then you get Nebraska at home, at Illinois, and then you finish with Wisconsin at home. So again, at Minnesota, at Penn State, you travel to play Illinois, you have to play Nebraska, you have to play Michigan State, you travel to play Purdue, you still play Wisconsin. This is a hard schedule. What did I write? Oh, I said schedule is not easy. 4-4, because if they lose to Wisconsin, if they lose at Penn State, lose at Minnesota, that's 3 games right there that I would almost expect
Kevin,
them
if
to
they
lose.
do what I said, they will. It's kind of like what I said with Illinois. They're going to be a middle of the pack team. They've got to beat the teams they're supposed to beat, the gimme teams, but the teams that they're better than. So if Iowa wants to be a top 1 or 2 team in this conference, they should beat Nebraska. They should beat Illinois. They should beat Northwestern. They should beat Purdue. Okay, and then you play Penn State. That's probably a loss. Maybe you lose at Wisconsin. Okay. Do you want to get over the hump and jump over and let Minnesota be better than you in the Big Ten West? That will be a good game.
That's the thing. Like, Iowa plays at Minnesota. Okay, are you better than Minnesota or not? We'll find out. If you're not, then I would expect you to lose at home to Wisconsin as well. Like, that's what will realistically end up happening. They'll probably end up splitting those 2, but at Penn State, I just expect them to lose. But you get Wisconsin at home, so that's helpful for you. I know,
like you said, Kevin, it's for Wisconsin on the road to play these teams. You can almost, I know you got to travel and you get out of your routine, but this is the year where I think the more talented teams are just going to win. Where usually I will give the home crowd more points than a Vegas line in college football. These stadiums are nuts when they're fully packed. You mentioned it. Penn State, fully packed, over 100,000. If you go in there with a new quarterback not playing in that situation, he was on the sidelines to watch, maybe. I don't remember the last time they visited. He may not have been on the roster last time they played him there. But that's intimidating. Now, even if they let 20% of the fans in, that's some of these kids that play in high schools, big ones, that's a Friday night high school football game for them. So I look at it and I just, again, I'm kind of putting out, I don't know what you call it, almost like show me Kirk Ferentz, show me Iowa. Are you going to put your foot down and put your clamps on the Big Ten West and be a top 1, 2, or 3 team every year? And to do that, the game that I'm looking at on this schedule is Minnesota. You should beat every other one of those teams if you're going to be a top team in the Big Ten West. And if we're having a conversation at the end of this season, Kevin, where Iowa's not 2 or 3, I am going to get on my it is time for Kirk Ferentz to leave. I did it last year, and I'm not going to back down from it. And it's not because he's a bad coach. It's just that I think they're wasting opportunity. They're wasting an opportunity to be a very good program in the Big Ten West and in the Big Ten overall. So that's all I got.
Yeah, he's done a good job, and that's it. Is that good enough, or do you want great? Do you want Wisconsin? Do you want top 10? Do you want going to the Big Ten championship 2 out of every 3 years? Like, is that what you want? Or do you want, like Troy said, win 7, win 8, win 10, win 7, win 8, win 11, win 7, win 8, win 10? You know, what do you want? So, anyway, that's 2 of our teams. We've got 2 to go here with Minnesota and Wisconsin, and we're literally about 30 minutes or so into the show. So, timing-wise, we were doing fantastic.
Good job, youngster!
Anyway, moving on to Minnesota. Last year, PJ Fleck was able to break through and win 11 games. So 11-2 overall, 7-2 in the Big Ten. So they didn't get over the hump, I guess, in that sense, but they definitely got over a hump for sure at Minnesota by winning 11 games. The next step is, overtaking Wisconsin and getting to the Big Ten title game and pressing the heck out of whoever gets there. So that's the next hurdle. Will they do that this year? We'll see. But they definitely took a step forward in 2019. They started off 9-0. They lost at Iowa, and then they lost to Wisconsin. So that's, again, those are the other teams that are usually consistently among the top in the Big Ten West. That's who you have to beat to be at the top there. Tanner Morgan returns, the quarterback. That's a plus. The negatives, your top running back, I don't remember what it was. I think it was all-purpose yardage from the running back position. In Rodney Smith, he's gone, so that obviously hurts. Tyler Johnson, who's an NFL receiver, he's gone. As I mentioned, an NFL guy, so that's that hurts. Those are 2 big guys that are that will hurt you. At the same time, Rashad Bateman was opting out of the season. Number 2, some could argue number 1 receiver from a year ago. Both those guys, Bateman and Johnson, going to be in the NFL. It's just a matter of when for Bateman. But so he opted out, and then a month or so ago he said, "Oh, okay, Big Ten's coming back. Well, I'm back in. I'm coming back to play." So that helps. You lose.
And I think that's
NFL
a good move
receiver
for him, Kevin, because I think he is a heck of a receiver. And if he can go out and duplicate another year, he can move up in the draft. I mean, receivers in the NFL are premium right now. And so a lot of people say, oh, he's got to be careful and not to get hurt, blah, blah. You know what? For a guy like that, Kevin, though, the way that the NFL has changed the dimension and going to a pass-happy league, a guy like that to be able to go out and play in 8 games, and it'll be 9 games. When he's playing 9 games, if he can go out and impress and be better than last year, he can move his draft stock up. And for a receiver, you want to be one of those, well, really, I guess now in college, you want to be a top 20 receiver. Because the top 20 receivers are going in rounds 1, 2, and 3 usually. I mean, I'm not sure if there was 20 in 3 rounds this year, but I'm being a little sarcastic there.
That's high, but last year I think set the record with like 7 in the first round. It was something ridiculous like that.
And I don't think it's going away. I really don't think you're going to see those numbers dwindle. A record last year, that's, I think, going to be the norm going forward right now. I mean, the NFL does change, but in the current state of the NFL, there is such a big premium on wide receiver. Teams want 3 really good receivers because a lot of times they're running 3 receiver sets. And you always see a lot of injuries to receivers, Kevin. Hamstrings, hands, fingers, toes. Teams want to stockpile receivers. They do.
It's almost
unless you're the Green Bay Packers and you just pass on all these top talented receivers in the first round. I had to rant one time about it. So my point on this is, though, I think for him coming back, Kevin, that was a great move on his part for his future. And it's great for Minnesota to have a top-notch playmaker on the outside. So that's all I got.
Yeah, for sure. The only thing I was going to add was the NFL. I think that's almost like the base set now, is having 3 receivers. You got one in the slot. You have one tight end. You have your running back. I mean, that's almost for most teams. It almost seems like that's their base package that they build out of. Some teams do it differently, obviously. But anyway, so yes, wide receivers at a premium. It's huge for him and Minnesota that he's back. And Mohamed Ibrahim is a quality running back who returns as well. So, yeah, you lose Rodney Smith. That sucks. Yeah, you lose Tyler Johnson. That sucks. That's just plain and simple. It sucks. But you have guys behind them. Bateman is an equal, if not superior, to Johnson. So they've got guys coming back for sure. The offensive line, I believe the entire offensive line returns, if I read it correctly. And then the top 4 tight ends return as well. So, I mean, this team loses a couple stars, but they should be just fine realistically this year, especially having your quarterback return. So that's huge. You lose Antoine Winfield at safety, probably your best, defensive player. So that sucks. But again, you have veterans as well, just stepping in, staying, returning. So will their secondary be as good? Maybe not, but it's still a veteran secondary. They should be fine. The defensive line has 1 starter returning. That's, especially in the Big Ten, not ideal unless you're playing Purdue, which thanks to the Big Ten West, they do every year, so that's good. But in general, having 1 starting defensive lineman return, usually not ideal. Obviously, guys that come in, transfer portal, whatever, can be better than those that left. I'm not saying that's impossible, but
no, Wisconsin defense proved that last year, and we're going to talk about Wisconsin in a little bit. If you remember last year, I had huge question marks on that Wisconsin defense from what they had 2 years ago. And I said, hey, I think they got good backups, and holy cow, they came in, answered all my questions. I thought there was going to be gaping holes. But to your point, for Minnesota, that could happen with them. They can lose these guys on the defensive line, and the guys that were chomping at the bit, practicing every day, hitting the starters, being on that second team, that third team, they're ready to play, and they might be better than the guys that they had there before, or just as good. And that's what you're hoping when you build a quality program, that when you lose guys, you plug a guy in and you don't, go down 25%. Maybe you go down 5% or 10% at the skill position, or sometimes you actually gain 5 or 10%. And so for Minnesota, there's questions. I mean, that's how I'd put it. There's questions there, and let's see if these guys that get their chance can prove it. And that actually segues me into what I'm going to say about Minnesota. And if the Gopher fans are listening in, they know a couple of years ago I jinxed the heck out of them because I was on the bandwagon or I was being real positive, and they would always do the opposite and lose when I said I was really high on them. I didn't talk much about Minnesota last year, Kevin. I'm going to say this, though. This is a challenge year for them. I'm going to challenge Minnesota. Yeah, you had a great year last year, and you know what, Gopher fans? Cheer, cheer, cheer. Your burgundy and gold, cheer as loud as you want. But now this is the year. Are you going to stay at the top of the Big Ten West, or are you going to flutter down into Illinois, Nebraska land? That's what I'm going to say.
Yeah, for sure. Recruiting-wise, 38th nationally, 9th in the Big Ten. 9th in the Big Ten sounds bad. Again, 38th nationally. I mean, that's a normal Minnesota recruiting class, in my opinion. They had a couple 4-stars in there, so nothing game-changing there in a good or bad way, in my opinion. Schedule-wise, Big Ten schedule, it's hard to catch breaks, but this schedule is arguably as soft as they come. So that's another positive Minnesota has going for it. You start with Michigan, so that's not a shot at Michigan, but you get Michigan at home. So that's a good thing. Week 2 at Maryland, week 3 at Illinois, week 4 you get Iowa. Oh look, you get them at home. So that's a good thing. After that, you get Purdue at home. The biggie is Week 6 at Wisconsin. That's the massive question mark for sure. The 2 weeks after that to close the season, Northwestern at home, at Nebraska. So, by the way, I forgot to mention that there will be a Week 9 for everybody. It's just we don't know who these teams are going to be playing. But regardless, Northwestern and Nebraska to close out the year. So, yeah, you play Michigan. Yeah, you play Iowa, but you get them both at home. That's a positive. And then, yeah, at Wisconsin. That's, there's your measuring stick. So to me, just on paper, I put them at 7-1 because I would favor them at home against Michigan and Iowa. And I would favor, I would favor Wisconsin to beat Minnesota. That would be the one game I think they absolutely should lose. But are there swing games in there?
This is where the challenge comes out, Kevin. This is where the challenge comes out. Are you going to stay on the level of Michigan? Are you going to stay on the level of Iowa? And do you want to contend with Wisconsin? If yes, then you're going to win that Michigan game. You're going to win the Iowa game, and maybe you pull off an upset and beat Wisconsin and go 8-0. Because all the other games, if they lose any of those other games, that all of us, you know what, there are anomalies in a season. Wisconsin poo-poos the bed once in a while. Ohio State even poo-poos the bed, right? Yep. Every once in a while. But those are established programs. And it's a kick in the you-know-whats to all the fans when it happens. You're an Ohio State fan. When they lose to, let's say, a Michigan State, that's like a kick in the kahunas to you, right?
Yeah.
And
or you go
like
to
Wisconsin,
Purdue and get blown out.
I forgot about that one. That one right there, that's my point. You go to Purdue, you get blown out. You're an Ohio State fan. You just felt like you got kicked in the you-know-whats.
Yep.
And that's like Illinois beating Wisconsin. It's like, really? You lose to Illinois? How can you do that? So when you're established, that's how the fan base reacts. You had one good year, and it's a prove-it year. It's a challenge. Can you go out and maintain that consistency? And we'll see. We'll see what Minnesota will do. If we're sitting here today assuming that they're going to carry the momentum and that consistency into this year, we could be totally wrong, Kevin. And that 7-1 record, that 6-2 record, all of a sudden we might be looking at the matchups for Week 9, and they're 2-6. Then what do we say to them? Like, whoa, what happened? I hope it's not that. But again, we're basing everything we talk about today on an assumption that they took a leap and now they're ready to be a contender. But it's only been 1 year. Yeah. So we'll see what happens. All right, on to Wisconsin. On Wisconsin.
Yes, on Wisconsin. So the Badgers a year ago.
When we get to Wisconsin, we should thank our virtual studio line sponsor, Interpeak Coffee, for sponsoring our show because they are in Wisconsin. And we're on a podcast, so we can have a call to action, unlike on the radio. Make sure you check out their website, interpeakcoffee.com. Free shipping to your door. Go check it out.
Yeah, number of things, not just coffee, but there's other stuff as well. So use the promo code SPORTS. Is that still in effect, Troy? Do you know?
Yes, it is.
There you go. Use the promo code SPORTS for 10% off your entire offer. Anyway, moving to Wisconsin, I know we'll get some listens for this portion of the show for sure. And so, last year they went 10-4 overall. So again, last year Minnesota went 11-2. Last year Wisconsin went 10-4, but both teams finished 7-2 in the Big Ten, and the difference was Wisconsin beat Minnesota. So that's why Wisconsin won the division. And one thing to note, earlier this month, Jack Cohn, senior returning starting quarterback, out indefinitely with a foot. It was a non-contact foot injury, and he had foot surgery. It was successful, but he's out indefinitely. So, I mean, you look at backup quarterbacks in Wisconsin, and you probably don't smile too often, but it's hard not to smile when you have the most heralded guy as the backup in program history waiting to step in Graham Mertz. So is this too early for him? Is he not ready? Is this going to, diminish his confidence? Is this going to be a dumpster fire? It could be, or it could be, holy cow, look at this quarterback, look at the arm he has. Why was he not starting over Cone a year ago? Was he just not ready? I don't know, but, man, this is unbelievable. Or it could be something.
I'll answer your question, youngster. I'll jump in. Name all the quarterbacks after Russell Wilson at Wisconsin that were great.
Yeah, I think we're done there. So.
And, well, to parlay that, I wanted you to name them, and then I wanted you to list off Wisconsin's records since Russell Wilson left. Not many down years. Couple. But consistently 9, 10, 11 wins. Some 12 wins in there. This team, as long as they can have a healthy offensive line and a good running game, Graham Mertz should be okay. I was not on Cohen's bandwagon. Not at all. Wisconsin doesn't win with great play from a quarterback. If they had great quarterback play, we might be talking about Wisconsin with the likes of an Ohio State and a Penn State. I really believe that. Because they got decent receivers, they got great running backs, they got a great offensive line, they got a really good defense that they always seem to plug players in. Yeah. My only thing as a Badger fan is we need to have, and I'll air quote, like in the NFL, you need to have a franchise guy. I'm not saying you got to have a 5-star number 1 recruit, but you got to have a guy that can put the ball down the field and can make the big play on 3rd and 7.
Be an NFL caliber guy. You don't have to be a franchise first-round pick guy, but be NFL caliber. Like Trace McSorley at Penn State, he's not going to be a starter in the NFL. It's almost,
And the Badgers have had some of those, Kevin. They've had some of those. But even when they're in college, I think a lot of their resume is based off their record. Like Cohen, if he would have played this year and led the Badgers to, let's say, 7-2, he may have gotten a look in the NFL. And, maybe then he can go and do things. My thing is, you've heard me harp on him. I text you every Saturday when the Badgers are playing and it's 3rd and 7 or 3rd and 8 and he dumps the ball and can't make a play. And I'll text you, told you, need a guy that can make a play. You need a quarterback that can make that play on 3rd and long. You can't live on 3rd and 2 and hope to win every game because you're not always going to have 3rd and 2.
Yeah. That's the difference for Wisconsin, and that's how you get over the hump is you have that quarterback that can consistently convert 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8. Because against Ohio State in the Big Ten Championship, against Penn State in the Big Ten Championship, against Alabama in the semifinal, against Oklahoma in the semifinal, against Texas in the semifinal.
Well, slow down on college football playoff, Kevin. I don't think Wisconsin's there yet.
But that's what I'm saying is you have to
stay on your Big Ten Championship. They got to beat Ohio State before we can talk that.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. Like taking that next step, you need that Russell Wilson type to be able to beat Ohio State, to be able to beat Texas, to be able to beat Alabama, to be able to beat Clemson. Like you have to get through 3 really good teams if you're actually going to win a national title. Like you could have the easiest schedule in the world, but you still have 3 very tough games at the end if you're really going to get to where you want to be.
I agree with you. And that's right. Everything else is in place in Paul Chryst's system except that guy. And again, I don't want to sit here and have fans think I'm ripping on Cohen. I'm not ripping on him. He is a good player. He's just not a guy that can consistently convert when we need the play. And that's what I'm looking for. He's had his shining moments, but he's also had those moments where he does look like a deer in headlights. Right. I'm at that point as a Badger fan where I'm like, okay, Big Ten Championship is actually my expectation every year. Right. Now I want to get to where my expectation is like for Ohio State fans like you, college playoff. That's where I want them to be. Because, they can get to the Big Ten Championship, and that is where I expect them to be. But then, honestly, Kevin, they got to play Ohio State or possibly a Penn State. Then I get worried. It's like, maybe they can pull an upset. I don't want them to have to pull an upset. I want it to be an even game where they're on that level.
Yeah.
So I love being a Badger fan, and I love the success they're having. I just want the next step now. Now I want that next step. But carry on with more of your notes. I know you got more. We spent probably way more much time on the quarterback than you wanted to. But I've been waiting to say that all day because it's just been eating at me about quarterback play at Wisconsin. Go ahead.
We needed to talk about it. That's the thing at Wisconsin. Program-wise, to take that next step. And honestly, me as an Ohio State fan, very quickly, like as far as
you don't want them to get quarterback play.
No, I don't. But how I see it is like when Ohio State matches up with Penn State, I'm like, oh Lord, like there is a 50-50, a 49-51 shot in our favor, Ohio State. I'm saying our because I'm an Ohio State fan. I just am. But I am realistic. That's with all the teams that I like. Ohio State any given year probably a little more talented. They're better than Penn State usually, but I know that's a very easily losable game. Wisconsin, I take it down a step. I take it a step down. Like we should beat Wisconsin. It's like you said, Troy. It's an upset if Wisconsin beats Ohio State. It's sad. But it's not devastating. It's understandable. It sucks when you lose to Purdue. It sucks when you lose to Indiana. It sucks when you lose to these other teams. You lose to Wisconsin. We should have won that one. But Penn State's like a hair above, in my opinion. And maybe I'm wrong on that. But anyway, so yes, quarterback play, that would solve literally everything for Wisconsin as far as getting over to the next step.
And maybe Graham Mertz is the guy.
Yes, I think he can be. And we'll see. we'll see early this year.
As long as they have the traditional running game going, I think it'll make life much easier for the young man.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, getting into this team, outside of Cohen and Mertz in that situation, Nakia Watson probably going to step in as Jonathan Taylor's replacement. Everyone knows what Jonathan Taylor did, and I don't have to talk about that. I don't think it's look, here's Nakia Watson, here's the next, top 15 draft pick. Wisconsin, 2,000-yard rusher. I don't necessarily think that. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he will take that next step and be a 2,000-yard guy. I don't know. Certainly not this season with 8-9 games. At least I'd be shocked.
If he ran for 2,000 in a 9-game season, he'd probably go to the NFL next year if he's eligible.
Right. So, I consider it to be one of those years at Wisconsin where, we have this guy, but we have this guy too, and we have that guy too. And overall, we're still going to run for 250 yards a game. Like, it's just going to look a little different. That's in my
Kevin,
opinion,
do you have the depth chart up? Do you have the depth chart up?
I have some notes. They're notable guys. Like their third down back, Garrett Groshek, he's back. So that's a capable guy they have. And then they also got a 4-star running back in this year's class.
Yeah. You got to look at the depth at running back because what I see this year, last year, workhorse Jonathan Taylor. This year I see more of a committee.
Right.
Unless Watson goes out and becomes a workhorse. I mean, you look at the history of Wisconsin running backs. It's like, well, I knew he'd be good. I didn't think he'd be that good. And that's kind of the surprise that we kind of almost get, what's the word, almost like accustomed to it. Like, oh, no worries. Yeah, this guy will come in and run for 2,000 yards in a regular season. But I think this year you're going to see more of a committee unless one of them just basically takes over. But again, that's what Paul Chryst does. A 4-star running back, is that any surprise? No, it's not. If you're a running back, why wouldn't you want to go to Wisconsin? I'm actually surprised, Kevin, that Paul Chryst doesn't get 5-star running backs with the offensive lines that he puts together. So you look at where can he improve. Hey, go get a 5-star, Paul Chryst. Go get him. Because you can get him as much as you utilize running backs. Go get him. But part of that is, though, Kevin, and I will say this, and I'm a Badger guy, so this segment might be a little longer than that 15 minutes we talk about.
Yeah.
If I'm a 5-star back, I don't want to come in and sit for a year. I don't want to come in and sit for a year, 2 years. And at Wisconsin, it's a pecking order. Paul Chryst has always had the pecking order. So you're not going to come into Wisconsin as a 5-star and expect to be the guy as a freshman. I mean, that's what I believe, and I think that's part of the reason that he's not getting 5-star running backs. They want to play immediately, and they're not going to at Wisconsin. You're going to be on the depth chart. You're going to be behind this guy, and this guy. That could be
what
part
happened the last couple of years at Penn State, and we'll get to Penn State next week. But Penn State, they had, I think it was 4-star plus, 4-star/5-star running backs on the roster at one point last year, and it's you can't all even play in a single game, let alone, a year from now, 2 years from now, yeah, you'll be the guy eventually. You don't even know that. They had so many. And a couple years ago when they had Barkley and then Miles Sanders as the backup, and then who knows who was backing up Miles Sanders, and now both those guys are, phenomenal NFL running backs. It's last year they had 4 that were just, you could tell the talent on every single one of them, but it was I think one of them ended up transferring. It might have been 2 of them. But yeah, they literally had too many. They literally had too many to keep them all happy. You can have 4 amazing running backs, but they're not all going to be happy. That's just the reality of it. You could have 2. You could have a third down specialist. You could have, a mix and match, whatever. But to have 4 guys who think they could rush for 1,500 yards on any Power 5 conference team is, they're just not all going to be happy. And that was the case with Penn State last year. Anyway, moving on. So, yeah, Wisconsin's got 3 guys I think they could probably lean on to do well. So, yeah, I'm in agreement with you there. Quintez Cephas and I believe his first name was Eric Cruikshank. They both departed. Cephas, I know, is in the NFL. And
with
so
the Detroit Lions.
Yeah. So those 2 guys were definitely contributors for sure on the outside. A year ago for Wisconsin, they're gone, but you still have Kendrick Pryor, you still have Danny Davis, so they still have guys that are capable for sure. So Mertz is not without talent. It's not as though there are no receivers to throw to, there's no tight end, and you're replacing one of the college football's best, most accomplished running backs. He's got guys to go to. The running game will be fine. The offensive line only has to replace 2 starters. It's not like you have to replace the whole thing. And Jake Ferguson, the top tight end, he returns. So this offense is going to be just fine. And in my honest opinion, with Mertz and his arm, I think it should be better. Not necessarily from a points or yards per play or whatever metric, which realistically means more. But at the end of the day, what really means more, I should say, is the threat of 3rd and 7, the threat of 3rd and 4, and going play action and getting killed from it.
Yeah, now you can send Ferguson down the seam with some accuracy and an arm and maybe get Ferguson out a little farther like they do in the NFL.
Exactly.
Because I like Ferguson.
Yeah,
Ferguson's
me too.
a good guy.
Yeah. I'd be surprised if he's not an NFL tight end eventually. So I like this offense a lot. I like Graham Mertz a lot, to be honest with you. And if it's not him handing the ball, off to a running back 30 times in Jonathan Taylor, which you probably should do when you have him and an offensive line like that. But if you're able to mix in, running and play action and doing it consistently and knowing you have the arm of the quarterback to chuck the ball 50 yards down the field to Danny Davis, that's what can make this offense take another step. And I think it can this year, honestly. So that's my take on the offense. Defensively, they were basically top 15 no matter what metric you look at. The bulk of the defensive line returns. There are two linebackers, Zach Bond and Chris Orr, that leave. Outside of those 2, so those 2 are notable guys for sure. That hurts you. There are other guys returning that have played. They'll be okay at linebacker, and they also have 2 4-star linebackers coming in.
I'll tell you, Kevin, as a Badger fan, if you look back, and I'll go back to last year's preview. Do you remember what I said? I'm like, that linebacking core, big question marks. It's usually never a question mark at a defensive line. You said, those guys are returning. It seems like that defensive line is they're there for 5-year seniors. That's what it seems like. And it's like linebacker. But then last year, you just talked about those guys. Pleasant surprise. It's like, whoa, because the year before, everybody was overshadowed by Watt. He overshadowed everybody. And you're like, well, who are these guys? And now you look at it this year, and like you said, well, yeah, they got a couple 4-stars. It's a funny thing, Kevin. We always talk about recruiting in Wisconsin. It's like, oh, yeah. Paul Chris is going to get guys for assistants, but then you look at the ratings, and I'm not a big rating guy. I don't care if you're 4 or 2. Do you fit in the system? But Paul Chris gets athletes at linebacker also. We talk about how great he does on the offensive line, but look at how many Wisconsin linebackers are now in the NFL over the past 3-4 years. It's amazing.
Yeah, agreed. No, it is a linebacker factory for sure. So no question there. Secondary, as far as what I read, they lost nobody. So, I mean, defense should be good. They should be fine.
Secondary, though, it's still tough when you got to go against the likes of an Ohio State, a Michigan, a Penn State, those passing offenses. Sure. I still have my concerns with the Wisconsin secondary, with the cornerbacks and safeties. It all comes down to the defensive line. Can you put pressure on the quarterback? But the thing is, you look what they can put pressure on an Ohio State quarterback, but he's a mobile quarterback that gets outside the pocket, and he's going to find his receivers. So, okay, they're not losing anybody in the secondary, but if I think there's a weakness on that defense, it's at secondary, it's at cornerback, it's at safety, unless the defensive line is giving constant pressure. And for the teams they play in the regular season, fine. But then again, you get to the championship, are you going to be able to do that against an Ohio State or a Penn State? And then my answer is no. So I think if there's a weak link on that defense, it is the cornerbacks and the safeties. But if the front 7 are doing their job, it makes their job a lot easier, and it makes them look a lot better when they're playing the likes of a Purdue or even in Iowa, because that defensive line is doing their job and the linebackers are doing their job. So then it makes those cornerbacks look better, right? When in fact they're average to maybe a little above average, if that makes any sense to you, Kevin.
Makes perfect sense. I have nothing to add there. Again, I agree 100%. Recruiting-wise, they were 26th nationally, 5th in the Big Ten. 26 to me is pretty good for Wisconsin.
That's actually really high for Paul Chris.
Yeah. I don't remember
Normally
it being...
he's in the 50s.
Yeah, I was going to say 40s, high 30s, maybe low 50s. Yeah, so 26. And, again, I was talking about it like, oh, look, a 4-star running back. Oh, look, 2 4-star linebackers. I didn't even mention they got 2 4-star tackles as well. They had 5 4-stars in this class, which usually doesn't happen at Wisconsin.
No, there's usually not many 4-stars. Usually a lot of 3s.
Yeah. Yep. So that's a thing. Again, take the star caliber for what it is. Some guys will flame out. Some guys will be better than what their star, count is.
But like you say, Kevin, for the NFL draft, it's a lottery. The more you have, the more chances you have to win, right? So by him getting more 4-stars, that means that there should be more talent, because he's still going to go out and get his 3-star guys that fit into the system, that are hard workers, that are blue-collar guys. So the more 4s you get, the more that are going to actually impact the team in a positive way. You can have that one 4-star that flails out because, he wasn't our top 4-star anyway. Or even if he was our top star, okay, well, we got this other guy that has just as much talent. We can plug him in there. No, I'm happy. Yep. I'm happy with the way that the recruiting classes have been the last 2 years. I think Paul Chris is doing an amazing job at Wisconsin.
Yep, agreed. And that's the difference that's how Penn State has taken a step up. Is like I mentioned before, they had like 4 really talented running backs on the roster last year. That's recruiting. You only need one. You only need one Jonathan Taylor. You only need one Saquon Barkley. You only need one Ezekiel Elliott. But if you have 4 of this and 3 of that and 5 of this and 4 of that, you can take a guy transferring. You can take a guy going out for the season with an injury. And, look, we have 2 or 3 more. That's the luxury you have at Ohio State. That's why they're so good every single year. is because they have a boatload of guys that can step in at any given down and be very productive. That's just what it is. So it's just a luxury to have. Wisconsin's schedule. Moving on. To close the show, at home against Illinois, like I mentioned earlier on the show, on Friday, October 23rd, to start the season. And then after that, at Nebraska. That, to me, those are 2 wins. Then you face Purdue at home. That should be another win. Then week 4 at Michigan could be interesting. I still favor Wisconsin there, especially with not much or no crowd. I think Wisconsin is just a better football team. The following week at Northwestern, I think Wisconsin's a better football team. Week 6, home against Minnesota. I would go with Wisconsin if I had to put money on it. Week 7, home against Indiana. Week 8, the final one at Iowa. I mean, on paper, realistically, looking at all these teams so far that we have, like, Wisconsin's the best team, and would I favor them to go to Iowa and win? I'd probably. Like, to me, there's no game they should lose, so to say, on the schedule. That this is not an unbelievable Michigan team where they should go to Michigan and lose. To me, it's not.
No, that'll be a big early game though, Kevin. It really will, because I just talked about it earlier in the show about the Big Ten West with the depth of the conference or that division. I think Wisconsin may lose one in there somewhere. So for them to beat Michigan on that crossover game, I think that's very important for them to get that win. Because as good as Wisconsin is, I did talk about the depth in a very sincere way that could Wisconsin lose to a Purdue? They could. Could they lose to a Northwestern? They could. I mean, that's the thing when you look at the depth of that conference. You have to be ready to play every week. The fan in me, looking at that schedule though, Kevin, I agree with you. They should, or maybe they won't be favored at Michigan, but it might be a pick'em game in Las Vegas because there's no home crowd advantage. But on paper, talent-wise, on this schedule, you could, and I would just let you win the argument. Somebody can say they could go 8-0. And I couldn't disagree, because talent-wise on paper, yes, Wisconsin should win or could win all of those games. But I'm being a realistic fan. With the depth of the West, that crossover game at Michigan, and I look at Minnesota and Iowa, the 2 teams that are trying to knock Wisconsin off the perch, they're going to be ready to play. Could I see an 8-0 team? I wouldn't be surprised if all of a sudden we're talking about Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship again. They went 8-0 during this COVID season. I wouldn't be jumping up and down saying, "Ooh, look at this, overexceeded." No, I would be like, okay, that they want to establish themselves as number 1 in the West. There you go. They did it again. They won all their games in the division. They won their 2 crossover games. Bam, they're 8-0. But I also wouldn't be surprised if we're talking about Wisconsin in 3rd place at 5-3. I really wouldn't, because I challenged Minnesota. I'm challenging Iowa, and they got to play Michigan. Those are 3 games they could lose. So I wouldn't be surprised if we're talking 5-3 at the end of the season or 8-0. It's just that's the way college football goes. It's a good team. Do I think they should win this Big Ten West? I do. But I also see those teams like Minnesota and Iowa right down there. And then you got the other teams in the division that we don't talk about a lot. We say, oh, average team. But in that Big Ten West, those average teams can pull upsets. So we'll see what happens. That's where I'm at, Kevin. I wouldn't be surprised at 8-0. I wouldn't be surprised at 5-3. What else you got?
Yeah, to me, 5-3 personally would be a disappointment, just because I
didn't say I'd be happy about it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that I could. I might have to talk about a 5-3 team.
Worst comes to worst, and I see what you're saying. as far as, games like at Nebraska, games like Purdue, games like Illinois. Yeah, they should win. Is it possible they lose? Yeah, it's possible. That's not insane. They lost to Illinois a year ago, so it's not impossible at all, especially game one with Graham Mertz. So anything's possible. If I had to pick it, I would just guess they go 7-1 and they lose, slip up somewhere. I still think they win the West, but that's just me. The last thing I wanted to add, the schedule, again, you start against Illinois and that defense. You start week 2 at Nebraska and that defense. And then week 3 you play Purdue and that defense. Like, this is a nice opening 3 weeks for Graham Mertz and the running game, and how's the running game going to work, and the new defensive pieces, and whatever question marks you have, they should be close to figured out after the first 3 weeks when they go 3-0. It should be. They should go 3-0. They're playing 3 bad defenses, realistically. So that's nice leading up to week 4 at Michigan.
And not overpowering offenses. So it'll allow that defense to get in sync. It's not. I don't want to call it preseason because then it sounds like I'm downgrading these 3 programs. They're football games, and yes, they should win. And what you're saying, Kevin, is Graham Mertz is not going to have to face an Ohio State defense in week 1 or a Penn State defense in week 2. He's going to be able to play against defenses that he should have some success. And on the other side of the ball for Wisconsin, having to replace those couple of linebackers, which I'm not really even worried about. This year I didn't talk about holes on a defense, but it'll allow them to have that extended time before they get to that big, and I call the Michigan game that big game, the big game, right? So they'll have some games that are winnable against opponents that are average to maybe a little bit above average, which is very good for a program to start the season that way. So what else you got, youngster? That might be a wrap.
That is it. That is all I have.
Thank you for listening in on the Inner Peak Coffee virtual studio line. For the youngster, I am the old man. Hope you enjoyed this preview. We will be recording another preview, so these might be popping up on the Grueling Truth. Bam, bam, bam. But again, thanks for listening in. We'll get back at you soon. Enjoy your day, everyone.